Good morning, everyone. I'm Padmini. My kind of intervention in this project has been basically along digital lines. Um, and it's been a fantastic project to be involved in, because I think as somebody who works in the digital humanities, the prospect and the scope of working outside just writing about research has been incredibly fulfilling, because I think in the digital humanities that's what we do. We kind of recreate and remake knowledge in different ways other than just writing about it. So through databases, through archives, through visualizations, etc. So I want to talk a little bit today about why we decided to do a Wikipedia edit-a-thon with the girls from Madanpur Khadar. I think it's important to kind of maybe just to kind of set the scene here, which is that the way that we have now come to understand our cities is completely mediated through corporate technology, right? So we are not, every city that we go to, the first thing that we do is look at Google Maps. It has, of course, kind of made the experience of being in an unfamiliar space much easier to handle and much easier to navigate. But it also means that we are, and I speak for almost everybody in the world who's using a mobile phone to access the internet, we are all using Google's model of the world. And this is kind of terrifying for many reasons. One being, of course, that it is not necessarily representative of urban space. It is but one perspective. So something that we have now kind of come to take as commonplace, say with the world map, that the Mercator projection is only but one of many possible projections. In the same way, I think it's necessary that we start thinking about how and why Google Maps look the way they do, what they prioritize, and also what they collect as they kind of create the universe that they do in this on the app and on search. And so I think just to kind of flag up the infrastructural kind of relationship here, Wikipedia is now obviously indexed by Google, and therefore it is the top hit for many objects, many named entities, which is a good thing. But what this also means is that we aren't using Wikipedia enough as a database to inform Google, because Wikipedia is not very representative when it comes to India. So I just want to quickly just flag up one project that has been looking at the kind of marginalized... No, this is, I'm just going onto the web. We have the web? Right? Yeah.
You're not trying to present...
No, I'm just showing web pages, as is my way. So who's...
Are you looking at it?
No, sure. Oh.
Nothing is being shown. That's why I'm saying.
Oh, okay. Why is that? Oh, I'll just close this. I'm going to keep talking while everyone else tries to resolve this. So Whose Knowledge is a project, I mean, you can look it up online, which was created by Anasuya Sengupta and others from the Global South to kind of look at how on Wikipedia knowledge is represented in very uneven ways. No, the internet is connected. Whose Knowledge is a project that looks at marginalized communities and how they're represented on the internet. I mean, needless to say, 80% of Wikipedia articles are written by people in North America and in the UK, so it's by English-speaking people. So there are several kind of problems when it comes to the representation of the Global South on the internet. One is, of course, the lack of Indian language as ubiquitous, because Indian language search, for example, has not been optimized. So natural language processing, which is what you need for a computer to understand how to kind of formulate syntax, for example, that is something that we haven't really managed to achieve very well in Indian languages. The other is that just Indic language computing has been fairly slow in India. There's some languages that have progressed faster than others, and Wikipedia actually has been a great driver for those Indian languages that have actually kind of become more visible on the internet. So Shubhashish Panigrahi, who used to be with Wikipedia and is now with Mozilla, for example, has done incredible work in Uriya, for example, and Uriya Wikipedia is incredibly rich compared to other language Wikipedias. So what we often found quite bizarre is that when, say, an Indian neighborhood is represented on Wikipedia, it's often written by somebody who has not gone to that space, who has no first-hand experience of what that is, and what they're doing is that they're pulling together, a number of, great, thank you so much, a number of kind of sources on the internet to kind of, create this kind of amalgam of facts about this area. But obviously, the people who know the area the best are the people who live in the area. And that was actually kind of what kind of brought us to this idea of doing an edit-a-thon with the girls. Because there is no substitute for local knowledge. No Google car is going to be able to represent the nuances of local knowledge. And I think what is also important to emphasize here is that the way that these girls are understanding the city means that that is giving rise to a certain form of knowledge and understanding of the city. And therefore sharing that to a larger audience means that we are sharing a different perspective on the city. That is not necessarily the hegemonic kind of very map-laden, very fact-laden perspective. So, very kind of small anecdote, but the one that I always like using is the fact that Madanpur Khadar has areas called Samosa Chowk and Jalebi Chowk. And these are obviously kind of, they're not formal names, and you're not going to necessarily see them on Google Maps, but that is how everybody knows the area. So I think there's also a kind of a tension here between what we mean when we mean knowing the city. Do we mean information about the city, or do we mean knowing the city in a way that lived experience can inform it? So I will show you the entry that we created. Oh, that's interesting. Where's the article itself? Yeah, so it seems. So yes, so what was fantastic about the edit-a-thon as an exercise, and I don't know whether you're familiar with what an edit-a-thon is, but it's basically getting people together in a room in order to create and edit Wikipedia articles to create and represent underrepresented areas on Wikipedia. And what was fantastic was that all the girls were paired up with their partners from SPA. So we had the students from SPA who have been studying Madanpur Khadar and obviously have been pursuing research on Madanpur Khadar, have gone to the neighborhood and learned about it, etc. But what we found really interesting was that it was the girls who were taking the lead on what needed to be represented about Khadar, because their lived experience revealed that these are the important things to know about this area. And then we could fill in the gaps with the research that had been done by the students at SPA. I think it was fairly unique in that the girls basically were the Wikipedia editors in this example. And I think if we think about the larger infrastructure of how kind of knowledge is represented online, something that we found when the girls were using their phones, for example, was that they conflate Google and the Chrome browser, right? And this, to me, has dangerous implications for the way that knowledge is going to be consumed in the future, because the kind of user journey, for example, for any one of these girls is that they'll search for something. Often if they're using code switching, so basically using, say, English and Hindi together, Google will throw up a number of recommendations that it believes are closest to what the person is looking for. And so basically this person's user journey is completely curated by recommendations as embedded by Google. So there's no prospect of this person to kind of go outside that walled garden. And I think, there's been a lot of conversation about Facebook and, when the free basics controversy happened about, how that's creating a walled garden. But I actually personally feel that Google is a much bigger danger because it is a walled garden of knowledge. So it's basically purporting to represent all the world's knowledge within its bounds and within its recommendations and algorithmically determined recommendations. So by making this Wikipedia article, we were also kind of looking at how to make an intervention in the digital archive itself. So if you think of the web as the archive, by kind of making this or bringing this into existence, we're bringing into existence another version of the city, of a neighborhood, of a locality as understood by its inhabitants, which if you think about it is actually very unusual. You know, when we are navigating the city, you know, using Google Maps, we are navigating the city as seen by the machine or as seen by data. We're not seeing it as, you know, shown by or understood by people. And I think that can have and hopefully will have significant implications for the way that we look at Wikipedia as a database. And I think that, you know, the conversation about Wikipedia as a database is still quite new, but Wikipedia introduced Wikidata relatively recently, which means that basically every time you create a Wikipedia article, you also create entities that allow it to be used as a database because it names entities and allows search engines to find content easier. So I kind of feel like by creating the Wikipedia article, not only were we doing something that allowed these girls to kind of imprint and inscribe their experience of the world into the larger digital archive, which in and of itself, I think is very liberating. But also, they're also transforming the digital record, which is, you know, they are publishing to the internet. And I think this is something that many users are not aware of, and you know, this could be any literacy level, this could be, you know, kind of any age as well, that the fact that we can write the internet, because we're constantly publishing, of course, we're constantly publishing on social media, but that's not the internet. And I think that, you know, this is a big kind of important difference that is beginning to get lost, because most people are now using the network via the app. They're not using the web. And so since they're not thinking about the browser, then they're not thinking about how can they publish to the web. I mean, of course, people are creating, you know, WordPress blogs or WordPress sites, etc. But that's, again, it's on a proprietary platform, and it's not necessarily kind of intervening in kind of the knowledge economy in the way that Wikipedia articles kind of allow for them to do. So I think, you know, what we also kind of encourage the girls to do, which Arya really helped with. I mean, Arya worked with them kind of really diligently to kind of get them to contribute, etc. And so I love the way that the local neighborhood is described, because this is very much, it's not a bird's eye view. It's somebody walking through the neighborhood. And I think that kind of understanding of infrastructure, of what that means for understanding the city, of what that means, you know, what that means in terms of relationships between nodes within a neighborhood as well, became much clearer because they were used to navigating the city and then writing about it. Lastly, I just kind of want to end with, so we have translated it to Hindi, and I had actually also had hoped that the girls would take some pictures, because, you know, if you take a picture and you upload it to Wikipedia, again, you're publishing to the internet. And I think I still am quite amazed by that, you know, you can make your work available to people by just doing something unique and contributing to the web. So yes, so we have, I mean, obviously some of this is kind of girded by kind of research that has been done by the students, but there's Jagori, who obviously we had to mention. And so yes, I hope you'll take a look at it and kind of consider how Wikipedia and how editing Wikipedia can be seen as a constructive mode by which to represent knowledge in a way that actually is quite subversive. It's challenging this kind of hegemonic notion of, you know, this is the city as Google sees it. Because that has, and I think, you know, in the context of our larger project, that has very serious implications for the idea of the smart city, right? Because the smart city is driven by data that is taken from who else? Google, right? So, you know, in order to kind of make interventions, kind of prise open the gaps where data cannot be used to kind of understand a space, I think things like kind of using Wikipedia is very important. And just one last point, which I think is just more about the methodology of what we did. So a lot of the information that we got was generated by, you know, an affinity mapping exercise where we got both the girls and the students to tell us information about Madanpur Khadar. But what is important and kind of interesting to note is that these are what we call oral citations. And Wikipedia, because of its, I guess, Enlightenment roots, it is an encyclopedia after all, it is very clear that you are not allowed to cite anything that is not printed or not available on the web. And this actually is a huge problem for representation of the Global South, because most of our knowledge, most of our information is oral. So for me, I thought this was a really kind of important case to advocate for the need for oral citations to be accepted on Wikipedia, because if Wikipedia is interested and engaged with the fact that the Global South is not being represented as well as it can be, then we have to accept oral citations as valid forms of information, because most of this was kind of basically oral information that we were given to by the girls. Of course, there was corroboration by going to the neighborhood and pictures and maps and documents from corporation documents, etc. But a lot of the information were what we call oral citations. And I think, just as a kind of footnote to emphasize the fact that basically what this allows for is various forms of knowledge, various forms of experiential knowledge, various forms of embodied knowledge to be incorporated into a fairly kind of static encyclopedic database. And I think that has a lot of potential. So I hope other people will do this with their own neighborhoods maybe, and kind of maybe subvert the Google bot. Thanks.